Women have been conditioned to treat male attention like oxygen. Okay. And what has happened is that systems of power have conditioned and programmed women to deify men in their minds, their hearts, their bodies, and their lives. And this is why we see such an existential crisis happening around women who are single because of circumstance and they don't want to be. Now, hear me out here. I'm not saying that the desire for companionship or partnership is not common, is not typical. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that for many women who are experiencing what feels like grief, it's because on an identity level, they have deified men in their lives, in their minds, their bodies, and their hearts. And you see it play out in the way they are dealing with or not dealing with the fact that maybe they have not met somebody and they're not currently partnered. But also you see it play out in the lives of women who are partnered. Now, I haven't done a video, I don't think yet, on decentering men and what that really is, because I have very particular views on what decentering men is. I think there are dimensions to decentering men. But the thing about deifying men, when you view men as if they're gods and not just imperfect human beings that you are a peer, an equal peer with, that you have intrinsic human value and so do they. They are not superior to you, and their attention, their selection of you, their choosing of you should not hold more weight than how you see yourself. This is important. This is very, very important. Because what happens is so many women do not see any value within themselves. They don't feel worthy when they have not been chosen by a man. And there are lots of invisible contracts around how that has come to be. And I want to be very clear here. In many ways, what we're about to talk about isn't really about men. It's about you and how you see yourself and what you have been conditioned and programmed to idolize, to deify in your nervous system on an identity level. Okay. And the way it starts to impact the way you see yourself, your self-esteem, your self-respect. Okay. A lot of women end up doing some things that are very undignified in order to be chosen, to be selected by a man. Because for a lot of women, you don't believe that unless you are chosen, you are valuable. Now, first of all, let's take a step back here, okay? Because how do women get to the point where they believe that being single is a failure, that rejection reduces your value, that marriage proves your worth, okay? That male attention is evidence of your value. And I have to say at this point, girl, there is no value in a man being, being attracted to you. That has no value. A man finding you sexually attractive is not valuable to you, because that's all that is. That's sexual attraction. That is not the same as a man cherishing you, respecting you deeply, highly esteeming you, and that being evident in his behavior, his decisions, and his actions, and him being a loyal man that treats you with decency. That's not the same thing. So the mere attention of a man should hold no value to you, especially if it's purely sexual, because that's all it is. You are a means to an end, a means to the end. And I know people struggle with this kind of frank talking, but it's true. You have to detach your sense of self, value, and worth from male attention. And for some women, it is oxygen. I saw a TikTok, apparently, the young lady has now removed her video, but she talked about the fact that she has so much more freedom now that she's married, because she doesn't have to worry about finding a husband. And she proceeded to share the fact that prior to getting married, every day, all she thought about was if this was going to be the day she met her husband. Every time she went out with friends, every time she socialized, she was thinking, when am I going to meet my husband? So for her, now that she's married, she's experiencing freedom because she is not preoccupied with meeting her husband. She's since removed the video because, of course, it wasn't received particularly well. Male attention can't be oxygen to you. You cannot find and seek your inherent intrinsic value as a woman in being chosen by a man for marriage of all things. You do not become more valuable if a man chooses you. Now, how do we get to this point? Well, let's just be honest. Systems of power have always conditioned and programmed women to believe that their inherent and only value can be found in being chosen by a man. Now, this does mean if you are not heterosexual, well, I'm sorry, systems of power don't give a heck about you, right? Because the system runs on women partnering with men, procreating with men, okay? And so from childhood, girls are being trained to be wives. The toys that they play with, the way you're encouraged to dress, the way you're encouraged to speak and be softly spoken, to be acceptable, to be respectable, to be the good girl. Yeah, you're trained in how to cook in some cultures, how to take care of certain domestic tasks, how to prepare yourself to be chosen by a man. That's why there was such an uproar when one of my very first online videos, I said, a plum tomato and a blender will never see my kitchen, because my value is not inherently in servitude and utility in a domestic context for the benefit of a man. No, I am an adult and I view men as my peers. I view a man as an adult. He is an adult, and unless he is disabled, he should be functioning like an adult. My inherent role on this earth is not to cook, clean, do laundry, and cook for a man. And that often gets pushback, but it's true. I reject these gender social constructs that mean that because I happen to be female, that my only role and my highest value is found in a domestic setting after some man has given me a ring and I've signed a legal contract that binds me to him until death do us part. That is the messaging that is sent to young girls from childhood in films, in fairy tales, okay, in the Disney movies, in religion. It's been enshrined often in religion that a woman's inherent value sits in her becoming a man's wife and becoming useful. Her utility, her availability of her body, her resources is only found in marriage, according to religion. Advertising plays into this, okay? Family systems of power, your peers. So it doesn't come from nowhere. You don't develop this hankering for male attention. You do not develop this reliance on men as if they are oxygen from nowhere. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. Systems of power are always conspiring to make you believe that these invisible contracts are true, that you should obey these invisible contracts to be accepted, to belong, to be safe, to be rewarded. And let's be honest, these systems of power do reward women for getting married. Now, whether or not you're enjoying the marriage is a different thing, but the system is set up for women to move from their childhood home under the authority of their parents, where you've been obedient to your parents, into a husbandly owner's home, so that you are now under his authority, and you are now submitting to your husband. That's the way the system works. If you follow the status quo, that's what happens. That's the pipeline. Parental obedience, husbandly ownership and submission. And so it doesn't come from nowhere. You're constantly being presented with messaging all of the time that your value is found in being partnered. And you know what I want to say at this point, because it's so funny to me, there's always somebody in the comments saying, why are you glorifying singleness? Why are you anti-marriage? This is not it. Like I said, it is about adulthood and being in your full authority as a woman, a human being that happens to be a woman, and understanding that you are so much more than that. Even if you go on to choose it, you are so much more than that. And being able to show up in your own life, in your full breadth, that is beautiful. That is edifying. Right? And so the point here isn't to necessarily, it's about being aware of this. And so this is why we will see women staying too long in unhealthy, dysfunctional, toxic, environments. Okay, you'll see women accepting poor treatment. You'll see women self-abandoning when it comes to financing men. Okay, ignoring your own instincts and intuition, not using discernment. In fact, the way systems of power work, they don't even want you as a woman to develop discernment. That's one of the reasons why you're encouraged as a woman to get married as young as possible, before you've even had a chance to develop your self-authority and a sense of self. That's why women often end up competing with other men. It's resource guarding. You know, one of the things that I observed in certain cultures is that that's why some women don't even want their husband to help another woman. They don't even want him showing just general appropriate acts of kindness. It's resource guarding, because the way women have been conditioned is to believe that there's a scarcity of men in the first place. And also you own that man when he becomes your husband, because you did the work to get chosen. You did the work to be chosen and be selected. So now only you can benefit from him as a resource. Right? And so women compete with other women to be chosen. They do. Why do you think there are women presenting themselves to be trad wives? You get the women who are cooking half naked on the internet for men. I'm not saying all of the women are. I'm saying there are specific women who do. You get women saying, well, that's why I'm chosen. I'm wife material. You're not. It goes on and on and on. The competition amongst women, sometimes subtle, sometimes overt, because they want to be chosen. They want to be noticed. They love it when men say, see, protect this woman at all costs because she cooks and cleans. A woman gets online and says she never denies her man sex. And men say, protect her at all costs. She's setting us, it's virtue signaling. It's not very virtuous, but it's a type of signaling that says, choose me. I'm good enough. Me. There's a lot of pushback at the moment on the term being a pick-me. You know, women who are accused of being pick-me's. Now people are co-opting it and saying there's nothing wrong with caring about your partner. There's nothing wrong with wanting to treat him well. Of course there's nothing wrong with that. That's insanity. That's immaturity to think that you can mistreat someone in a relationship. That doesn't align. That doesn't work. No one's encouraging that. But it's the things, the lengths that women are willing to go to because being chosen feels like oxygen. You've deified the man to the extent that you self-abandon your comfort. Why do you think there are women who are on contraception that have poor side effects, and they're doing it because their male partner says it feels better for him? Women who have to beg their partner and a health professional to have their tubes tied because they've gotten to the point where if they have another pregnancy, it's going to seriously impact their health, their mental health and their physical health. But their husband wants more children, even though he's not the one having them. You see it show up in so many ways where women are deifying the man. In fact, they are worshiping him. They're submitting to him in ways that they can't bring themselves to submit to their own God that they say they worship. In fact, at times, right, you ask a woman about his favorite food, his favorite color, just how he likes his little area tickled and licked. They know it to the T, how to serve that man. They can anticipate his needs, but they can't anticipate their own. These are the signs that you're self-abandoning.